Okay, so sound check. So, the previous video was actually interrupted, no? So let's go to which part did we stop? I think here. Okay, so I think I have mentioned, no, that there are actually some differences with regards to the virtue ethics and utilitarianism. Okay, for a while, huh? There's actually some difference between the virtue ethics ni Aristotle and also the moral theory of utilitarianism in a sense that utilitarianism actually focuses more on the consequences or the effects of a certain action, while the virtue ethics, no, it actually is more focused on the person who is carrying out the action. So, a right act or a good act is an act that is carried out by a virtuous person. And sa utilitarianism, ang goodness or ang wrongness of a certain action is determined by the kind of consequences or the effect that that certain action brings out, no, or is brought forth. So a right act is an act that brings the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Okay? So, in a vantage point, if you're going to actually compare it with the other discussions that we had sa atuang ethics, so utilitarianism can be called as a consequentialist view of moral theory. So it has it's more focused on the consequences of certain actions. And sa katong moral duties or the ontology, it's more focused on moral obligations or duties that has to be followed or that has to be accomplished. And sa virtue ethics, it's more about the person's character that determines the wrongness or rightness of that person's certain nga action. So pleasure as a basis of morality. This is actually one of the arguments ni Jeremy Bentham. No? So according to the greatest happiness principle, the ultimate end with reference to and for the sake of which all other things are desirable is an existence exempt as far as possible from pain and as rich as possible as enjoyments, both in point of quantity and quality. So happiness or satisfaction of pleasure is the chief human good. That is the end that must be achieved. No, all other things that are instrumental in bringing forth happiness or satisfaction are just means to reach that point or end. So how do we actually quantify? How do we actually define what is good? So according sa utilitarianist, no, the good is something that actually brings about pleasure, something that is not, or something that is the absence of pain or suffering, something that actually brings forth happiness, satisfaction of preferences, or something that promotes the well being of all or the greatest number of persons. So if we are going to actually use utilitarianism in judging the moral worth sa ato ang action, then we would have to apply the utilitarian nga analysis. No? So we would have to consider these factors in actually judging if a certain action will is going to maximize happiness. No? So analysis is universal. If ang action nako is right for me, it is right for all similarly nga placed. And also each person count equally. The consequences for all are considered and not just a cost benefit analysis, no. So calculation is objective. So what we mean by this using utilitarian analysis is that we must somehow quantify what kind or how much happiness do we want to achieve or do we want to actually promote for everyone or for the greatest number of persons or people. So diri na siya moabot ang seven elements sa principle of utility ni Jeremy Bentham. You have here intensity, duration, probability, proximity, fecundity, extent, and purity. These are the elements with which we actually quantify if a certain action will bring about the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. No? So you have here intensity, no? Degree of it actually pertains to the degree of pleasure. The more intense it is, the better, no? Duration, the length of time one experiences pleasure, and also probability, most certain effect is what is desired. And also proximity, the frequency of the pleasure, and fecundity or the capacity to result to more pleasures, and also extent. More people can experience pleasure. And purity or the absence of painful counter effects. So what I'm actually mentioning, no, the word pleasure here is not something that is only limited to what we actually experience, no, the human pleasure. It could actually, um, if we're going to go back sa definition ni Stuart Mill, na siya ginaingon nga pleasures that are rooted in one's higher faculties or one that are actually rooted sa lower nga qualities. So ang ato ang actually mas way more is ang katong higher nga faculties, no? But since that is Jeremy Bentham's idea, so it's more about, the hedonistic side of pleasure, no? So it's more about the lower kinds of pleasure, no? One that actually satisfies your probably your hunger, your boredom, no? And not really more about the intellectual or moral nga or aesthetic nga faculties. Okay, let me just. Okay, so I think so this part, no? I hope you can also see that kanisha kaning nasa kong arrow. Okay, now let's go back, no? Again, according kang Jeremy Bentham, muni siya ang seven nga elements nga atong i-use when we actually quantify and use the utilitarian analysis in judging whether an action is actually right or wrong, no? So ang concept ni John Stuart Mill, it's actually more of he actually argues nga murag robotic ra kayo or limited ra kayo ang view ni Jeremy Bentham in a sense nga murag iya rang ginalimit kung ang parameter sa isa ka happiness or ang isa ka standard nga ang is dapat mauling lang siya ang action nga atong buhaton kay para ma-achieve to nga happiness, no? So for John Stuart Mill, he actually argues that it's not only the quantity that matters, but it's also the quality of happiness or the pleasure that will also matter, no? He argues that human enjoyment or satisfaction should be both in terms of quality and not only in quantity. Any act is moral if it produces pleasure. It is not moral when it results to pain or suffering. So also there should be a balance that should be made between an individual's pleasure or happiness and its effect on others. Since most of us will actually have individual preferences and our preferences will sometimes not be congruent with those of the others or for most of us or no. So there should be actually a balance nga dapat i-consider pod ang quality of happiness nga dapat nato i-attain. So now let's go to the kinds of utilitarianism for both of the proponents, no? So natay what we call act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. So act utilitarianism consider effects of this particular act in this particular nga circumstances. So mas focus siya sa consequences sa isa ka action, no? And sa rule utilitarianism, this is more about John Stuart Mill. It actually considered the effects of following the general rule covering this class of actions. No, so does this certain action, is it something that will promote, or is it something that will benefit the most number of people? So that is actually the gist, or that is actually the point of rule utilitarianism. No. So ang rule utilitarianism, it will consider the idea that an act as a matter of principle is one which belongs to the kind of acts which, by way of common experience, always results to or provides the maximum utility or promotes general happiness. No? So, ang iyarang gina-consider is, are these certain kinds of action will produce the most benefit to the most number of people. Instead nga, iyahang i-base iyahang utilitarianism sa consequences alone ana nga particular nga action, no? Sa act utilitarianism, it's more about a certain consequence on a certain circumstance or case. But ang sa rule utilitarianism, it's more of a general rule or principle or standard nga ga-cover adtong certain nga mga actions. Actions like, falsifying data whenever you feel it, or, lying to someone, no? Would that be something that is moral? So something like that. So we have here the utilitarian nga application, no? So you have to state the action for it to be evaluated, and you also have to identify all affected by the action, or all parties nga affected ana nga certain nga action. So is there some dominant consideration? And also you have to specify all the good and bad consequences for all the affected parties. So, dira nimo state kung unsay iyang likely effect for all of the concerned nga parties. So you also have to total the good and the bad. You also have to consider all alternatives imaginatively. So the action that produced the most good over bad is the morally correct action, no? So Max, let's also sige ko balik-balik aning maximum utility, no, or utility. So what does it actually mean? So it actually means the greatest benefit for the greatest number. So dapat ma-use or ma-utilize nimo ang isa ka certain action to the extent nga it would promote happiness, or it would promote beneficence or benefits for all that is involved, no? So ang pitfall, I think ang pitfall lang gyud sa utilitarianism is that it would be impossible to actually um, anticipate or actually predict some of the foreseeable consequences of a certain action, no? So humans aren't, really fortune tellers that they can know for certain if a certain action would actually lead to certain consequences, no? Say for example, no, if I would to go back to a certain time period wherein I would encounter Adolf Hitler being born in a certain age or time, then if I'm going to have this kind of decision or choice nga, am I going to kill this person? Is it really good to kill this baby nga Adolf Hitler if it would actually prevent him from doing all of those atrocities nga iyahang nahimo during sa iyahang time sa Nazi, no? that is something that you would also have to, consider, no? Is it really something that would actually benefit everyone, or is my action of killing that person, is it going to have this other consequences? No. Like, probably I'm going to have to accept the consequence nga I'm going to somehow alter the point of history, no? So I'm going to change something that I shouldn't even change, no? And that is something that we also have to consider, no, when we actually think about using this moral theory when it comes to judging a certain action as moral or immoral, no. And also, if you would actually consider the benefiting the most number of people, it's like saying the majority is actually has the most say in judging if an action is actually moral or not, no. Masacrifice na to ang sake sa ang welfare sa isa ka individual because we wanted to satisfy the majority. And that would be contradictory, no, since the individual also has his own dignity as a human person. That would actually violate him, no. Di ba dapat i-count pod nato siya, dili lang kay ang kadaghanan pod, but also that one person. Individuals, in view of their desire to gain the best possible benefit, have individual preferences. So this is something that is actually the pitfall, no, of utilitarianism. Kanang dili kay siya ga-focus sa individual nga preferences but more of unsa tong action nga mas maka benefit tanan. So some preferences might not be in accordance with the preference of others, and so to achieve the maximum utility one has to give way or in a sense sacrifice to the majority. So you are at the mercy of the majority of the person, no? Okay, so I think we can okay, so potential pitfalls to guard against, no? So some of the things that are stated here, no, like not concerning all those affected, okay, giving preferences is more likely to the outcomes one prefers. So in a way, dapat sad we should actually strike a balance in a way that actually mas ma-promote tong highest good to most number of people. But in reality, that is actually impossible now because there will always be some individuals who are not in accordance or who are not going to agree with the rest of us. No. And also, there are a lot of consequences, unforeseeable consequences that we're not going to be able to anticipate. No? And that is something that we have to consider put. So weighing good versus bad outcomes too quickly and without adequate nga justification. So some limitations. In some new situations, we cannot know the consequences of an act or policy. And it gives a circuitous and counterintuitive account of justice, rights, and virtue. No? So using this kind of morality actually only is good for some of the businessmen, no? For those who are actually in dealing with business, no? For them, this is actually good in a sense nga for them mas ma-quantify ang ilang ginabase ilang morality sa ilang action is the more people nga mag-benefit ani the better, no, for them. It's actually one of the most logical kind of moral theory there is, but it is actually very contrarian to the concepts of justice, no, rights and virtue. Everyone should be accorded, justice. Dili lang kay katong a certain number of people. Like everyone, all, no. This is something It is something absolute. This is not something that should be falling on certain conditions. No, everyone has actually human rights. Tanan dapat natay rights, no, and that should actually be respected, regardless if regardless sa to ang circumstances or sa to ang social status, economic status, or etc. whatsoever. Okay, so that ends the recorded lecture for today. And okay, so homework. Please niya ako og read sa chapter lessons. I think I already posted this sa LMS. Please answer the following guide questions. Katong guide questions numbers 1 to 10. Let me check the page. Page 47 to page 48. So, guide questions again, number 1 to 10, and explain the following statements sa page 48, numbers 1 to 4. You can use one whole sheet of paper, or you can also upload an encoded work sa LMS. So I'm going to post an assignment or homework activity dito sa LMS, and you can choose to upload your homework. No? So we're not going to have any face-to-face class next week, since I'm going to attend with some important matter, and but we're going to have our online class lang siguro, no? In lieu of the face-to-face na class, we're going to have the online class lang for this for our future lessons. Okay? So thank you for listening or for viewing this recorded lecture, and have a good day to everyone.